Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto got a massive harem with Hanabi and Samui? Part 1. A changed destiny, powerful bonds, and a new path that challenges the shinobi world. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 1. It was nighttime within the hidden village Konoha as miles away from a traumatic event was happening within the forest. Within a clearing was a boy by the age of 13 with sun-kissed blonde hair and whisker-like marks on his cheeks as he was dressed in an orange jumpsuit along with a pair of green goggles around his forehead. Carrying a large scroll on his back, looked despairingly at his once trusted teacher, a man with whitish-gray hair under his bandana as he was wearing the standard Konoha Chunin uniform with two huge shurikens attached to his back just told him a disheartening secret. That's right Naruto, you're the Kyuubi that attacked our home 13 years ago. And now the time has come for you to die. Yelled the man, known as Mizuki, as he threw one of his shuriken towards Naruto, using his frozen shock to strike him down but unknown to them another man, who wore the same outfit as Mizuki only with the standard headband as well dark brown hair tied in a ponytail along with a scar across his face and nose named Iruka, who was also the blonde's sensei, watched on. Seeing his assistant turned traitor's weapon moving speeding towards his student, he launched himself to protect the jinchūriki from the incoming projectile only to trip and fall over. Naruto! He screamed as he watched in horror as the bladed weapon sliced off one of his arms as blood gushed from the gash as the Uzumaki screamed. My arm! Naruto cried out in agony as he tried to stop the flow of blood from what remained of his arm, but there was too much blood gushing from the wound as Mizuki laughed at his pain. What's the matter, oh great Kyuubi? Mizuki mocked while laughing as seeing the demon brat in pain. Don't worry, I know how to make it all better. He added with a cruel grin as he grabbed his second shuriken only instead of reeling his arm back to throw it, he jumped towards the ground and began walking toward the heavily bleeding Naruto, only for Iruka to block his path. I'm not going to let you near him, Mizuki. Iruka stated with a kunai in hand as he stares down his fellow Chunin trying to protect Naruto by standing between them. Oh, get real Iruka. That fox has had this coming for the longest time, now get out of my way. Mizuki screamed, trying to hit Iruka with his shuriken as the scar-faced instructor tried to dodge only to be faked out as the traitor used the opening to deliver a swift kick directing into his side resulting in him getting knocked out of the way as the white-haired instructor resumed making his way toward Naruto who was still bleeding out. It won't stop. The blood won't stop. Naruto cried as he was completely panicking now before looking with wide eyes as he noticed Mizuki in front of him. Wah-ah. Before he knows it, Mizuki used his shuriken to cut off his other arm and causing him to scream once more while Mizuki, growing tired of the noise from the brat, stabbed him dead center in his chest to silence him as the academy dead last fell to the ground, coughing out as he was covered with his own blood while hearing Iruka called out his name as he begins attacking Mizuki. While all that is happening, Naruto, quickly feeling his consciousness fading away, begins wondering if this was really the end of him. Is this it? Is this how my life ends even before I could even become Hokage? This can't be it, I want to live. I would give anything to live. He cried mentally as he didn't want to die before suddenly hearing a feminine voice within his head. Would you give up your humanity? The voice questioned, causing his fading blue eyes to dart around trying to find the source of the voice only to hear the continuing sound of the two academy teachers fighting. Who's there? He asked, not knowing what to make of this as the voice continued. The ones who could save your life, and all you need is to give up your humanity and you shall live. This time a second feminine voice replied as Naruto wasn't sure if he liked the sound of this or not before asking. If I do that, then what will I become? He questioned wondering what would happen to him if he gave up his humanity. You will become what everyone always thought you were, a demon, a very powerful one at that. The second voice replied as the whiskered blonde widened his eyes. Then how do I get people to respect me if I become that? The reply shook Naruto to his very core since his treatment by the villagers had now made sense, but how would becoming the very thing they accused him of being will get them to acknowledge him? You know deep down, they will never respect you since it's better to be feared than respected. After all, they already think of you a demon, why would they ever let you become their leader? Now choose because your time is short. The The first voice argued as well, making a solid point to the jinchūriki as he began thinking about his crap pile of a life as tears of emotional pain wailed within his eyes. So unable to do anything else, Naruto gave in. Fine, take it. Take my humanity so I can show them what a real demon can do. He yelled furiously as tears and blood leaked from his eyes as the voice laughed lightly, glad to see the boy finally sees the truth about humankind. Very well, let this day be known as the day of your rebirth as a demon. The two voices exclaimed as they proceeded to transform the Uzumaki into the very being the idiot humans labeled him as. During the battle that Iruka and Mizuki were engaged in, a dark light began to surround Naruto's body as he slowly began getting up while the blood from his wounds began to strangely flow into the air before his eyes snapped open, revealing them to now be completely white. RRRWWWRRR. He then releases a demonic roar that could have possibly been heard for miles as the sound had grabbed both Chunin's attention. Upon seeing the demon brat up again, Mizuki began to panic, thinking that the Kyuubi had awakened its power. While figuring that he needed to finish the job quickly, he kicked Iruka out of the way before dashing towards Naruto. "Die Kyuubi brat," he exclaimed while reaching for his shuriken, preparing to strike the jinchūriki down again. Only in his haste, the white-hair instructor failed to notice Naruto's blood gathering where his arms once were as they quickly began forming a vague facsimile of the lost appendages as Mizuki was moments away from stabbing his head with his trusted shuriken, only it wouldn't come to be because as the traitor went to complete his self-imposed mission, he was stopped short as he coughed up blood. Wah! He thought before looking down, and what he soon saw terrified him to his core as a dark-skinned arm covered in bright red veins that ended in a claw-like hand with nails that resembled blades was embedded right within his torso. As his eyes followed said arm to see that it was attached to none other than Naruto, as his eyes had returned to their normal blue, only the pupils were slit like a cat, or a fox, before the Uzumaki smiled a twisted smile as his eyes were now filled with bloodlust. "Hello there Mizuki, and now goodbye," Naruto said with a cruel mocking tone and a twisted smile as he used his other claw-bladed hand to slice Mizuki into pieces as blood spilled everywhere as the dark light faded from around him. Snapping out from seeing his former assistant literally torn to shreds, Iruka's worry for Naruto resurfaced. Naruto, are you okay?" he asked as Naruto turned to him with a smile while his eyes were no longer filled with bloodlust. "Yeah, I'm aah." Naruto started to say only to scream while holding his head as he felt something inside him telling him to kill. Unable to resist the call, Naruto's body began to move of its own as his new claws were raised and posed to strike his friend and teacher. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Iruka asked while noticing his student trying to stop himself as he came swiping and slashing at him. I don't know. But I can't stop. I can't stop this feeling. I have to kill," Naruto exclaimed as he was no longer in control since he was unable to fight this new demonic instinct. Iruka knew he could have continued to easily dodge the attacks, but he knew what Naruto needed, so he'd have to do just that. "It's all right Naruto, I understand. But promise me one thing," Iruka said with a smile on his face as the student he saw as a little brother looked at him with scared teary eyes. "Promise me that you won't change too much," he said as he stopped moving, allowing one of the blonde's clawed hands to strike deeply into his chest before swiping upward, tearing his body in half while his blood splattered over him. All Naruto could think was how he didn't want this at all as tears fell down his face as he stared at Iruka's bloody remains while his final words rang inside his head. "Iruka-sensei." He cried out into the uncaring sky as the blood of his sensei was now forever stained upon his hands as rain soon began to pour over the forest. "I promise Iruka-sensei, I promise I won't change," he whispered to himself as his eyes darkened as he began wandering aimlessly through the forest, completely forgetting that he still had the forbidden scroll strapped to his back. Meanwhile, deep within a cave, two figures stood watching had saw the whole ordeal happening through a large crystal the size of a dining table. "So sister, when do you think he'll be ready?" the first figure said as she was the first voice Naruto heard. "Only time will tell dear sister, only time will tell," the second figure said, revealing herself to be the second voice as they turned their attention towards a large carving on the cave wall. 19-year-old teen was squaring off against a group of large tigers that could only be found within the forest of death as the young man was treating this like some kind of training or exercise as he was wearing nothing but a pair of torn black Anbu-style pants as he was huge, standing 6 feet 5 inches in height as his body was packed with toned muscles that was also littered with some scars of past battles with the other creatures living here. Come on, you overgrown house cats. Is that really the best you guys can do? The teen exclaimed, hardly breaking a sweat as he dodged another beast that was trying to get the jump on him from behind. Don't tell me you guys are done for the day? Questioned the man, wiping away a strand of his messy blonde mane as a much bigger tiger confronted him while baring its fangs, causing him to smirk as his hands transformed into 5-bladed claws. Taking a confident stance, he said, "Bring it on, Ms. Kitty." He taunted, spurring the alpha tiger to strike at him. Meanwhile, at the Hokage tower within her office, Tsunade was looking through the paperwork with the now retired third Hokage sitting across from her. "So tell me, sensei, what brings you here today?" she asked her former teacher, who gave her the position as he couldn't hold up the title of Hokage anymore. Not since that night so many years ago when the Forbidden Scroll was stolen, and they've found 2 academy instructors dead. Tsunade Senju, aka the 5th Hokage for last 6 years now, was a woman in her 50s but only appears young thanks to her genjutsu, as she has blonde hair tied in twin ponytails and honey brown eyes with a small violet diamond mark on her forehead, as well a very full curvy figure. She was wearing a gray kimono style blouse with no sleeves that held her enormous blue pants that has hugged her thick hips, and plump as well the standard shinobi sandals. "I'm here because I have been hearing a rumor of late about the Forest of Death," said an elderly man named Hiruzen Sarutobi, also known as the third Hokage, as his former student heaved a sigh knowing what this was about. "Yes, about the forest, sensei." Tsunade started, having read some past reports about the location. There have been some reports about markings on the trees, even on stones around the area, which seems to be from some strange-looking claw marks. "It's disturbing that there is something more dangerous living out there than the animal," she said while skimming through some of the reports on the incident. "I see, do you have a team looking through it?" Hiruzen asked her, as this was very serious since they have no clue on what kind of creature has taken up residence in their own backyard. "Yes, though a small one," she replied, having seen some of their best shinobis into the forest her grandfather had created. Back within the Forest of Death, a small group of Junin appeared in a part of the forest and found what they had expected. An area that was full of corpses of animals, not just any animals either, but the most dangerous ones, as well as claw marks on every available surface. "Just like those times before," said one of the Junin to another. "Yeah, like with the killer plants." "Oh, don't get me started on the huge bugs," replied the other. "But the question still remains, just what are we dealing with?" asked the last Junin as he and the other looked towards the deepest part of the Forest of Death. Within the deeper parts of the forest, the man was walking around the forest as he knew that there were people to kill in the area, and he's trying to compose himself as he began chanting his mantra. "Can't lose control, I mustn't lose control," he repeated to himself as his hand kept trying transform. "Why do I have this bloodlust?" he questioned while trying to get further away. "I need to get away or else I'll succumb to it," he exclaimed, kneeling by a riverbed as he stared at his reflection as his blue eyes glowed demonically while the whisker marks on his face shifted before he pushed himself back up and kept going until he finally arrived at his home, as in was an old base that was once used by a certain Sanin that was abandoned many years ago. "I'm home now, Naruto Uzumaki is home," he breathed. He enters the place he had made his home, revealing himself to be Naruto Uzumaki, once human and now a demon, as he had fought his bloodlust that he had gained that night 6 years ago. Once he entered, his body quickly began twitching violently as he slammed himself against the wall. "Damn it!" Naruto cursed as he slid down onto the floor as he grabbed one of his hands as his fingers began fluxing into claws. Killing those tigers wasn't enough. Killing anything here no longer satisfies the bloodlust. He groaned while he tried, thinking there must be a way before he completely loses himself and kills everyone in the village, as he sat back up thinking of a way not to fall into his bloodlust. "I guess I have no other choice but kill a few humans," he said in defeat, knowing he was out of ideas. Going over to his closet, the Uzumaki dug through the items he had gathered for the past 6 years ever since he became a demon before grabbing what he needed as he put on a hood cloak before heading out towards the village to satisfy his bloodlust. It was nighttime at Konoha's park, as many things could happen here during the night and no one would be the wiser, as a woman with long purple hair wearing a long-sleeved kimono was being terrorized as she was harassed by 3 drunken Chunin-level ninja. "Look what we have here, boys, she's one of those damn Hyuga women," one of them called, pointing towards her pale white eyes, as the identified Hyuga winced from the stench of alcohol permeated from the men. "Yeah, she sure is," another exclaimed as he took a deep swig from the bottle in his hand. "I say we have our way with her since our oh so faithful wives left us," spat the third, with his friends liking the idea since they can take their frustration out on the woman while also putting her in her place, since the Hyuga clan think they're so much better than everyone. The Hyuga woman was scared as she was Hitomi Hyuga, and she was just walking through the park because she doesn't want to be around her husband right now, and sadly just thinking about said husband led to her getting distracted as the drunken Chunins used that opening to attack on her. "Kami, please save me and curse my husband as well," she mentally prayed while also cursing her husband, who happens to be one Hiyashi Hyuga, clan head and leader of the Hyuga, as these drunkards were prepared to start raping her. What they didn't know that Naruto was up in a tree watching as he was wearing his gear consisting of black vest unzipped showing of his muscular built and abs, combat pants, gloves, and boots that allows him to be one with the shadows, as he considered what he should do while fighting the bloodlust that had kicked up again, only it was stronger this time. "I don't know what I should do," the demonized blonde thought as he was trying to make a decision, as his hands slowly transformed into claws as a memory of something flashed through his mind, and not having the time to analyze it, he jumped down and readied his claws as one of the drunken Chunin tried to grab Hitomi before jabbing his hand into his back, causing him stop upon seeing the blood-covered claw sticking out of his chest stopped him cold as the hood-wearing demon pulled his arm as the Chunin dropped dead from the blood that was filling the first drunk in his lungs. Seeing the death of their friend caught the other 2 intoxicated shinobi attention. What are you?" the second Chunin asked the hooded figure as he peed himself. Sensing the fear rolling off of him caused an amused grin to appear upon Naruto's face. "I'm a demon, and you are dead," he declared as he swung his left claw at the second drunken Chunin, who stood there gasping for a few seconds until he turned to his remaining comrade before literally falling into pieces, leaving only the lone Chunin scared shitless as he decided to run. Praying to Kami to help him, only he didn't get far as the concealed demon to quickly chase him easily as the Uzumaki slashed the guy's legs off as the drunken Chunin fell as he began crawling with all his might but still couldn't get away, as he could see was the hooded figure to lunge towards him, as he could only scream as he felt the cloaked creature's hand stabbed him in the back as he began stabbing him repeatedly until the Chunin's screaming died down. Hitomi Hyuga was privy to a front row seat of this carnage. "Kami, what have you sent?" she breathes wispily as she slowly approaches her savior, who kept stabbing the corpse, until he finally stopped as he was now breathing hard. He felt the bloodlust recede some. Feeling his bloodlust receding, Naruto looked down at his hands as they slowly changed back to normal. "Man, that felt good. And the bloodlust is gone for now, but for how long, though?" he thought as he started walking away, glancing at Hitomi to make sure she was okay, before continuing to head back to the forest. Wait. Hitomi called, trying to stop him as the man stopped and looked at her. "See, can you take me with you?" Hitomi asked her hooded savior, as this experience made her scared and that she doesn't want to head back to the clan compound if something like this happens again. Hearing her asking to go with him, the demonized blonde gave her a confused look. Why do you want me to take you away? Don't you have family or something?" he calmly asked, wondering why she would want to with him. "I do, but my husband is not the same as he once was, as he was once a kind and caring man," the Hyuga matriarch started before continuing. "But all of that soon changed when our daughters were born, as he practically abuses our middle child as if she has the plague itself, since she takes after me in kindness. But sadly, in a clan that must be strong and cold, my daughter is sweet and bright, as I can't stand by and allow him to continue as he has, since he won't even get rid of the caged bird seal," she explained while clenching her hands into fist at the thought of her daughter's suffering. Cocking his head to the side, Naruto asked what she meant. "What is the caged bird seal?" As soon as he said that, it caused the purplet to shudder, since the sounds of his growling voice was affecting her in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time since her youngest was born. Quickly getting control of her repressed urges, the mother answered him. "It is what separates our house, as those with this accursed seal are servants to those without it," she explained while squirming around since this man's voice had a serious effect on her. The hooded figure then glanced towards her hand as he motioned to the ring on her finger. "If you wish to come with me, leave that ring behind," he stated, and without a moment of hesitation, Hitomi removed her ring and dropped it where she stood as he grabbed the Hyuga mother into his arms, causing her to blush as she felt his strong arms around her body, and spirited her away back towards the forest of death. Upon arriving home with Hitomi by his side, the pair walked inside while the Hyuga matriarch was thinking about her 3 daughters and if they're worrying how her disappearance would affect them. So deep in thought, she hadn't noticed that Naruto had removed his hood until after he started speaking. "If you're going to stay here, you're not allowed go out without me as it's dangerous to go alone," he said, getting her attention as the perplet finally got a good look at her savior's face and immediately recognized him. Wait, you're Naruto," she exclaimed, remembering the picture by her middle child's bedside table since he was all that girl could think about most days. Naruto was slightly surprised that she knew his name. "I'm surprised at someone like you who knows who I am, seeing that you are from the Hyuga clan," he replied, since from what he could remember was that the Hyuga clan were so uptight they don't even bother to remember the names of those they see as beneath them. Well, not everyone would paint the Hokage faces after all. She recalled that event with a gentle amused smile since vandalizing a village monument in broad daylight wasn't very forgettable. The whiskered Uzumaki began scratching the side of his head trying to recall that event. "Right, I did that," he trailed off as he was struggling to remember before deciding to drop it. "Anyway, I should warn you that there will be times that I seem off," he said, getting the woman to look at him confused as he walked into the other room. Hitomi began to consider her new life with a man who seemed much better than her husband as she also started looking around her possible new home since the place wasn't huge as she wondered where she'd sleep, or bathe. After a while Naruto returned to the room wearing only his pants when she turned her gaze on him as she could see how well built the younger man was, not overly muscular like a bodybuilder, but still athletic as a blush slowly built upon her face while her eyes grazed upon his body. "Oh Kami, just look how well built he is, I think I might sleep with him, but don't know if he likes older women," she thought while rubbing her thighs under her kimono as she kept looking at him as she was debating on if she should sleep with him or not. Naruto then noticed her long stare. "Is something the matter? You're looking at me like you want to tell me something," he asked, raising an eyebrow as he was confused by the older woman's behavior. Snapping out of her thoughts, the Hyuga tried to give him a reply. Well, I was thinking that I would," stuttering she began thinking of a way to get him in the mood as an idea popped into her head as she quickly moved behind him. "Give you a massage," she quickly stated as her hands began to work his shoulders while gliding her chest against his back. Grunting softly, the blonde stopped her by gently removing her hands. "As good as this feels, I'd like to lay down and you can continue in my room if you'd like," Naruto said, feeling a little tired as Hitomi's quick compliance seemed a little off to him as they both went to the bedroom where the perplet resumed massaging his shoulders. As Hitomi massaged Naruto's shoulders, she felt the muscles that belonged there. If his body was like this, then what is he like down there? "Maybe I could take a quick peek," she mused before shaking her head since thinking such things made her feel hot under the collar. "Kami, I really want to find out, but the question is how?" She mentally questioned as an idea came to her mind as she stopped her ministrations for a bit, which confused Naruto, as she quickly undid her kimono causing her massive and still perky double K cup size to bounce as she wasn't wearing a bra before grabbing hold of them as she then places her milky jugs against his back as she began rolling them up and down. Naruto, to say the least, was surprised at her actions as he looked at her confusedly. "What are you doing?" he started asking but was quickly silenced when she pulled him into a heated kiss. Separating from the kiss, Hitomi turned away with an embarrassed blush on her face. "I'm sorry Naruto, it's just it has been so long since my former husband haven't touched me since our youngest daughter was born," she explained with tears in her eyes since it had been a very long time since she felt the touch of a man. Seeing her like this sent a pang into his heart as Naruto gently cupped her chin and turned her head as he stared into her eyes. "I understand," he simply said as he kissed, causing the Hyuga MILF to blush lightly from before she started to kiss back while the Uzumaki removed the rest of her kimono, revealing the rest of her MILF figure as she has wide childbearing hips along with a juicy plump, as she was only left in her dark purple slightly see-through panties which were dampened by her arousal as they continued to explore each other's mouths as they slowly descended to the bed. Once they were both on the mattress, Naruto slipped his hand into his partner's underwear and gently cupped her as he slid 2 fingers into her folds as he soon started fingering her, causing Hitomi to moan loudly while thinking of an attempt to increase her pleasure, puts his mouth on one of her hardened nipples and started on it, which made the MILF's moans louder than before. "Okay Cammy, I haven't felt in so long," she mentally cried as her face was completely flushed with pleasure as her inner walls constrict around the 2 digits inside of her before feeling her new lover suddenly stopped fingering her as he removed them from her now soaked as he started taking off his pants as her eyes widen at the sight of his enormous 13-inch tool. That thing is huge," she exclaimed as she looked at his hardened member as it was 2 times longer and thicker than her soon-to-be ex-husband. Upon seeing her shocked expression, Naruto gave a slight chuckle. He boasted with a grin since a normal man with his member wouldn't even be able to get an erection, but thanks to his abnormal physiology, the Uzumaki had what most men wanted, and most women wished their husbands had. Hitomi gulped as her twitched as she eyed the younger man. Would he even fit inside me? She thought very nervously, even though she was more than willing to find out, even if he still had room to grow. As if sensing her discomfort, Naruto suggested something lighter than to help her ease into it, even though this would be his first time. "How about you blow me?" he suggested with a smirk as the Hyuga just nodded shyly as she began licking his from the base to the tip. After licking Naruto for a bit, Hitomi was now ready as she placed the tip of his against her lips and slowly began taking him into her mouth while moaning from the taste. Naru-kun even taste better than Hiyashi, she mentally cooed as she heard Naruto's moans as he was enjoying the feeling of her mouth, even if she was only able to take less than half of his total length inside, as the perplet began bobbing her head as she happily hummed. "He's so big, and this tastes so good." Hayashi could never compare with Naruto's, not in 1,000 years. She cooed in her head while swirling her tongue around the head of his staff as she grabbed a hold of the rest of his length as she began to pump what she was unable to service with her mouth. Naruto, frustrated that not all his monstrous hand could fit in Hitomi's mouth, grabbed hold of the sides of her head and began shoving the rest of his rod inch by painstaking inch until he was completely inside of her mouth. "Hitomi, take my entire life, the busty you are," he growled huskily while Hitomi, feeling pressure building up, widened her eyes as she felt her first orgasm in so many years just from being treated in such a manner, though feeling a tad disappointed that her favorite panties were ruined as the demon blonde continued thrusting his into her throat while his heavy balls bumped against her chin. As the blonde kept thrusting his into the Hyuga woman's mouth, he began releasing a series of grunts and groans. "Damn, what a mouth," he grunted as he was enjoying the feeling of his first blow job, began rocking his hips harder while the perplet MILF's eyes seemed to question if she was pleasing him since it has been a long time since she last did this with her husband, but that doubt soon left her head as she felt his hands gripping her head. "Mrs. Hyuga, something's coming," Naruto screamed as he felt tightening right before he unleashed an enormous load deep into Hitomi's mouth as her eyes widened from just how much he was releasing as she tried to swallow it all as her stomach began to bulge from the amount as he released a deep primal growl before ramming his hips forward, knocking her off of his still firing cannon as he continued to coat her upper body and endowed chest until his release finally subsided. Hitomi sat up with her mouth open as she saw just how much of her body was coated in his cum. "Kami, he released so much, and it feels so hot," she mentally mused as she rubbed her hands over her cum-covered tits as she loved how warm his cum was on her bare flesh. Taking a few steady breaths after experiencing his first orgasm, the whiskered Uzumaki turned his attention towards his lover. "That was amazing, Mrs." he started before the older woman placed a finger over his lips while shaking her head at him. Wrapping a hand around his still hard rod, she looked up at him with pleading eyes. Please call me Hitomi," she nervously requested, giving him a gentle firm squeeze as this young man was going to make her feel like a real woman as a heavy blush appeared on her face. "Alright Hitomi, let's take this to the next level," Naruto said with a lustful grin as he lifted Hitomi upward as he looked deeply into her pale white eyes as he placed her upon his enormous length, rubbing it against her inner thighs and which was soaked with needy arousal. Shuddering at the feeling of the demon's stiffness, she released soft coats while her neglected body got hotter. It's still so hard even after coming that much, just how long can he go?" She was a little scared to see him with this much energy, something her ex hardly even have, as she was both excited and scared at the thought of a most pleasant death experience. Feeling that she was wet enough, Naruto moved the Hyuga matriarch onto her hands and knees before removing her ruined panties. Just look at how wet you are, Hitomi. I bet you came a few times yourself. Right, he cheekily mused while lightly rubbing her damp entrance, making her moan loudly as she gripped the pillow tightly, placed the tip of his against her folds as she felt the tip enter her slightly as he slowly pumped the head into her as her juices leaked around his rod as the perplet was moaning from the slight pleasure before feeling him moving upward against her, making Hitomi feel greatly nervous. No wait, I've never done it there before. She cried with a burning blush on her face as she felt her new lovers rubbing in between her plump peaches since she had never done this before. I noticed, but I think it's a fair trade since this way we can lose our virginities together, Naruto sweetly assured, rubbing her lower back before cupping her rear, causing Hitomi to blush before groaning as she felt him pushing Hisanto, her virgin, feeling her insides being stretched. Ah Kami, this is so tight. He grunted as he firmly gripped her hips while he continued to push more of his slowly and deeply into her. Hitomi cried out, "You're as barely inside me, yet it's too much," she added while unknowingly shaking her at her new lover as he watched those massive soft buns jiggle as he got a wicked idea as he gave her wonderful smack. "Ah," she yelps as Naruto kept spanking her plump cheeks as they jiggled. My ass," she moaned as he spanked her a few more times as he began thrusting his deeper into her. "Oh Akami," she screamed louder than she ever had before as she felt the blondes going deeper into her while he continued to spank her, since both of those actions were driving her crazy. Finished with his fun on the buns, Naruto started thrusting his seven deeper into her as he grabbed both of his lover's arms, pulling them behind her as well, raising her upward, allowing him to thrust the rest of his into her back door as he started moving his hips faster and harder, causing her gigantic melons to bounce and sway. Hitomi screamed even louder as her began squeezing around the thick pole inside of her. "Oh Kami, you're so big and deep inside, keep going," she yelled lustfully as she started to get used to the feeling as she felt his movement increase as his huge nuts smacked against the bottom of her butt as well inner thighs, as a heavy lustful look appeared on her face as she enjoyed being more by the younger man. Naruto had changed their position into a mating press with the older woman's legs draped over his shoulders until he felt the same tightening feeling from earlier. "I'm going to come, Hito-chan," he declared while thrusting wildly and harder as he felt his second orgasm approaching. Hearing her lover saying he was close, Hitomi tightens her around his length as she felt an old familiar feeling she hadn't felt in such a long time. "Me too, Naru-kun, please come inside," she cried out in a husky begging tone which encouraged the blonde demon to buck his hips harder and faster. "Then make sure that your takes it all, you Hyuga," Naruto commanded as he gave one final hard thrust before releasing a deep throaty growl as his fires another massive load of cum deep into Hitomi. The perplexed MILF cried out blissfully as she experiences her first orgasm in so many years. "You're filling me up with so much cum," she squealed as she felt wave after wave of hot boiling baby batter entered her while her juices gushed all over the Uzumaki's abs and pelvis. After waiting a few moments until his release subsided, Naruto removed his from hair, allowing some of his seed to leak out as they both took a breather. "That was fantastic," he breathed as sat back while his still hard rested between Hitomi's thighs as he looked to see that her belly had swollen from how much he pumped into her as she looked like she was 5 months pregnant, as he then moved her up onto his hard-on as he rubbed against her folds. Feeling the younger man's rubbing against her, snapped Hitomi out of her rest as she realized that they're going to do it again as she pushed herself on top of him. "Make me yours, Naruto, please make me feel like a woman again," she begged, rubbing her massive milk jugs against his hard pecs while rocking her against his hot birthing rod. Naruto smirked at seeing the Hyuga clan's matriarch as he positioned his head into her entrance. "Very well, take it all, slut," he declared as he then slammed himself all the way into her. Hitomi screamed the loudest she had ever did. They started their romp as she felt the tip of her new lover's bumping against her womb. She lustfully screamed as her walls clenched tightly around Naruto as she had another orgasm just from feeling him enter her. "And it's very tight here too," the demonic Uzumaki grunted as he grabbed both, making her moan as his finger kneeled her enormous knockers as milk began leaking from her nipples as he soon started thrusting into her while one of them into his mouth as it made the Hyuga MILF crazier as she screamed with all she had, feeling a far superior hitting her womb while her lactating tits were being feasted and played upon. Hitomi exclaimed as she experiences her fifth orgasm of the night as the blonde stud had moved them into a pile driver position as he was pounding into her harder and faster as her whole body was rocking from his movement. "I'm going to come again," Naruto declared, thrusting into her more as he felt his balls tightening as he was close to blowing. She declared in a lustful voice since Naruto had been giving her what your ex-Hiyashi had denied her for so many years as she felt his strong arms lift her up so they could be face to face as she tightly wrapped her arms and legs around him as they both shared a deep passionate kiss as he thrust into her even more as she was getting closer to coming again. Both of them soon came as Naruto released a deep throaty roar as fired another load into Hitomi's as she screamed, feeling her new lover come deep inside of her as she felt her womb getting more filled than ever before. She screamed again, this in a mixture of pain and pleasure as she felt the blonde bit into her collarbone, drawing a bit of blood which quickly took the form of a mark as it appeared to be a dragon with its tail wrapped a heart with a swirl in the middle of it as her inner muscles clamped tighter around the stud inside of her as she experienced another orgasm while feeling her body getting flooded with energy. After a few more hours of amazing, Naruto and Hitomi were cuddling against each other on the mattress as the latter moved closer to the former as her trailed kisses and love bites around her neck. "You belong to me, Hito-chan, now and forever," he huskily growled, wrapping his arms around her, bringing her closer while rubbing his semi-hard hand between her thighs. "That's right, Naru-kun, for I belong to you and only you," the extremely busty perplet cooed as she rubbed herself against his length as it rose back to full mass as she placed a hand on her swollen stomach while gently rubbing it. "I can't wait to carry your baby, Naru-kun. You come so much better and last wait longer than my ex-husband," she giggled as she was hoping she was impregnated by her younger, better lover. With a feral grin, Naruto shifted them so he was on top of her while she lay on her back. "Then how about we continue and see if I can knock you up with more than one baby, Hito-chan? What do you say to the thought of twins or triplets?" he huskily said, rubbing his rod against her while cupping one of her tits, causing her arousal to return as he drank more of her milk before they both got started again. After several more hours of rough lovemaking, Naruto was redressed in his gear, going through the forest of Konoha in order to find food for his new mate Hitomi to eat since her into unconsciousness. "Man, do I feel better as it has been a whole day and not once had my bloodlust spike," he said to himself with a grin since he hasn't felt the urge to kill until he saw a person lying unconscious on the forest floor. Whose could that be? He questioned out loud, feeling that there was something wrong, and while he knew he shouldn't get involved, his curiosity got the better of him. Going up to the person, he turned them onto their back so he could see their face and was surprised at who he found. Chapter 2. Naruto was hunting in the area surrounding his territory to bring food to his new mate Hitomi when he came across an unusual sight of a figure collapsed in the distance as he approached them. Into his demonic eyes, it looked like a woman with long raven black hair as she was wearing a bedroom robe that hid most of her body as she seemed to move as if greatly hurt, causing him to wonder what happened to this unfortunate woman. What could have done this to such a beautiful creature? He wondered out loud, but he'd have to worry about that later because for now he'd have to get her somewhere safe, and the safest place within this forest happens to be his home as it wasn't too far even with her apparent injuries as he picked her up and whisked her away toward home. Naruto arrived with the woman in his arms as he quickly opened the door and noticed Hitomi, who was still from their earlier intimacy but was also wet. "Looks like my cow MILF decided to clean up while I was gone," he thought with a grin as he noticed the clean scent of her, meaning that she had been in the shower. Once the extremely busty perplet noticed that her new lover had returned, she began to smile until she noticed the robed figure in his arms. "Makoto. Naruto, what happened?" she exclaimed with worry in her voice as she saw how beaten and bruised her fellow clan matriarch was. "I don't know, I found her like this so I brought her here since this is the safest place I could go," Naruto explained as he placed the now identified Makoto onto the bed. "Well, that's true since everyone in the village thinks that you're dead," the Hyuga woman recalled with a closed hand against her mouth as she'd trying desperately to figure out how to help her friend. "I guess I could go find someone who can help her, but who would listen to me?" Naruto mumbled, still deep in thought, trying to think of who could possibly help, but his head was still very cloudy. But then it hit him as he remembered that there was a nurse who actually helped him after he was attacked by a mob, as her name was Hana Retsu, since she saw him for himself and not as a demon. "Nurse Retsu," he exclaimed with a snap of his fingers. Hearing the blonde exclamation caused Hitomi to look at him questioningly. "Who?" she asked, wondering who he was talking about. There was this nurse named Unohana Retsu as she looked after me when I was little and still human whenever I got hurt. The Uzumaki explained while trying to sort through his foggy memories of that time. Hitomi nodded her head slightly as she now sees where he was going with this. Well, if she can help, then look for her Naruto while I look after Makoto here until you return, okay? Ask her for help, please. She asked while begging Takami to help her friend remain until help arrives. Naruto nodded back towards his mate with a determined look on his face. Once I do, I'm going to resume looking for food for you, well, for you and Makoto. He said as he readied himself to leave to find the nurse as well some food for the two women. As soon as the blonde demon left, Hitomi looked towards the sleeping Makoto. Oh Miko-chan, just who could have done this to you, she said worriedly as she sat next to the ravenette wondering what had happened to her. Somewhere in Konoha Naruto was leaping from one building to the next without anyone spotting him as he stopped briefly on one building in order to look around trying to remember which way he needed to go before he spotted a certain team that, in another life, he would have been on as he saw a boy the same age as him but with raven black hair. His hairstyle looked like a curtain bird's behind as he was wearing a gray sleeveless shirt with white arm warmers and shorts as he was carrying a sword on his back as this boy used to be one of Naruto's classmates from 9 years ago. Isn't that Sasuke? He doesn't look that much different from back then, he speculated, thinking of how weak-looking his former classmate was. Naruto then spotted someone wasn't familiar with, even if he does have amnesia, as he saw another boy with pale white skin with short blackish brown hair as he was wearing a shirt with a long sleeve on one side and a short one on the other as the shirt was also short since everyone could see his stomach as he also carried a sword on his shoulder as well. That weird smile, he smiled as he walked. Who is that guy, and why do I have the sudden urge to kill him? He said to himself as he could feel his bloodlust rising upon the sight of the unknown male. Then he turned his attention to the only female of the team as she's a girl with long bubblegum pink hair with bangs covering her large forehead and green eyes as she's wearing a red kippou dress with a white hemlines and a circle and dark green skin-tight pants. Sakura Haruno, the demonic blonde, growled as he instantly recognized his former classmate and ex-crush as it seemed the past 9 years didn't affect her growth at all as she looked exactly the same as before, only taller. As flashes of memories of the years spent in her company from her punching him for everything he'd do when they were little kids, even when he tried to be nice her as his hands began to change into claws as the blades dug into the roof he was on, leaving a mark before taking breaths as he tried to calm himself. Don't lose yourself over a sad little girl who couldn't get the guy that she likes to love her. He whispered as his claws returned to normal as he calmed himself down. I need to find Unohana as I think she should be working at the hospital right about now. He reminded himself since he needed to find the nurse ASAP as he leapt away from the team below. What he didn't know was that he turned to leave. A man wearing a uniform all Jonin wore with a mask covering the bottom half of his face and a headband that covered his left eye and gravity-defying silver gray hair put the book he was reading down as he was looking at a distant rooftop that Naruto was on not too long ago. What was that feeling? Whatever it was, it wasn't human. He thought, having felt the sudden spike of killer intent as the girl hollered at him. Kakashi-sensei, will you hurry it up, we have a mission to report to. Sakura yelled, getting the Jonin's attention since they had a mission to report to after all as he was several hours late, again. Naruto crouched on the outside wall on westernmost part of the hospital as he tried to find an open window to get inside as he finally found one on the 5th floor as he counted himself lucky since the room he entered was empty before quickly moving towards the door as he peeked out checking to see if the coast is clear before he spotted two women coming down the corridor as recognized the first woman as Tsunade of the Sanin while the other woman was in her late 20s as she had long brown hair and black eyes as she wore a dark blue kimono style blouse like the senjus except without the sleeves as it was held with a light blue belt, which was doing the best it could holding in her enormous bust, and dark blue pants that also copied the Hokage's style as he also noticed that both of them had a strange diamond-shaped mark on their foreheads. Sayuri, look, I know that you're old enough to look after yourself, but still, I can't help but worry. There is something going on in Konoha. Tsunade said looking at her companion as she was concerned about her safety. Like those 3 dead chunins that were found this morning. The now identified Sayuri asked, getting the Sanin to nod. Yes, as we've found claws marks similar to those found in the Forest of Death. We also found that they each had high amounts of alcohol in their system, as I think whatever it had stopped them from doing something stupid. Whatever it is, I just want you to be safe. The busty blonde stated, since whatever was living within the forest had now found its way into the village. Sayuri nodded, understanding the older woman's concern. I understand, Mom, as I also think they did plan to do something, but don't worry, as I'll still live at the compound with you. She said, giving her revealed mother a hug, as never the wiser to Naruto, unintentionally eavesdropping on their conversation as well, watching as their enormous melons mesh against each other. That's good to hear, because I just don't know what I'd do if I lost you or Shizune. Tsunade said, causing her daughter to giggle as they separated. Well, most likely you would tear down the whole village if something were to happen to us. She said with a smile, causing her mother to grumble, since that does sound like something she'd do, as both Senju women continued on their way with their voices fading, letting blissful silence fall once again. Seeing that the coast was now clear, Naruto exited the room, hoping he could find Unohana quickly, since he didn't want to be here for too long, as he began moving quietly down the halls before stopping on the first floor before opening it to peer inside, as he'd found her, looking as he remembered. Unohana Retsu is a youthful-looking woman with long black hair tied into a braid placed in front of her body and blue eyes, as she was dressed in a standard white nurse uniform that hugged her slender figure very well, as her ample e-cup and supple bounced with almost every step. Damn, I never realized how she is, he thought perversely. Even though the nurse wasn't as endowed like Hitomi or the Senju women, her appearance still managed to stir his little demon from its slumber, as he tried to figure out a way to bring her back to his home. However, he didn't need once, as luck would have it, she was moving for the door. I'm heading out. Unohana called out as she waved goodbye to her friends and coworkers. Watching the nurse leave, Naruto sighed as he banged his head against the wall. So I break into the hospital, only to find out that she's leaving. He groaned as he moved to follow her outside. Unohana had soon arrived at her small apartment where she lived alone, as she had placed her things on a small table as she made her way to the kitchen since she needed some tea. Nothing like some tea after a busy day, she said with exhaustion in her voice as she busied herself in the kitchen before feeling a soft breeze swept through the room. Where did that breeze come from? She questioned, looking around confused, since she never left the window open when she had a shift at the hospital. Nurse Retsu, Naruto asked, standing behind her, as the brunette released a cute yelp in fright as he had just scared the soul out of her. Quickly regaining her bearing, Unohana grabbed a knife and points it toward the hooded demon. Who are you? How did you get in here? She demanded, since her intimidation skills were pretty rusty since her retirement from the shinobi force. Naruto, seeing the woman startled, raised his hands while opening his palms to show he was unarmed. I am not here to hurt you, because I need your help, please. He begged, hoping his hood masked his voice well enough as he continued. There is someone in my home and she's hurt, as there are certain reasons I couldn't go to the hospital. So will you help her? He asked, since his earlier visit to the building had brought back some unpleasant memories that he'd wished were still forgotten. Unohana gave him a calculating look as she weighs her options. If he's telling the truth, then someone must really need my help. But if he's lying, then I might be killed, or worse. She quickly thought, since during her time as a kunoichi she had made a lot of enemies, as well seen a lot of her sisters in arms killed themselves from what happened to them during their captivity behind enemies' lines, though a part of her wanted to trust this stranger, as odd as that was, but seeing as she had no other choice, she agreed. Fine, I'll help. But be warned, if this is a trick, I'll punt your balls so hard you'll have to open your mouth just to take a leak. She threatens as she flared some killer intent towards the hooded man before her. Naruto sighed, wondering why all women threatened the genitals first. Well, I'll allow you to keep that knife as a sign of good faith if it makes you feel better. He said, leading her toward the window he used to get in as she climbed onto his back before rushing back towards the forest of death. It was nearly sundown when they arrived at his house. As they both he moved to the door. Looking around the area, Unohana couldn't but wondered, why would someone want to live here? She thought, finding it concerning that anyone would want to live in an area where death was literally part of its name. As Naruto opened the door and walked in, the black-haired nurse finally saw why she was brought out here to begin with. Lady Hitomi. Lady Makoto. The slender woman exclaimed upon seeing Hitomi, who looked fine, and a hurt unconscious Makoto as she turned towards the man who brought her here. I get it now. I bet you really kidnapped both of them. She accused, glaring heatedly at him, since over half of Konoha knew about the disappearance of Hitomi Hyuga and she's guessing that he just kidnapped Makoto. I'm afraid you're mistaken there, because he didn't kidnap me. In fact, he saved me from nearly getting raped by 3 chunins as well. Found Makoto like this and brought her here where she could be safe. Hitomi calmly stated with an eye twitch, since she had accused her savior and lover of kidnapping her. Are you sure? The brunette nurse asked, glancing towards the Hyuga matriarch while the busty perplet nodded. But what about your husband, Lady Hitomi? She asked as she saw her face quickly turn sour at the mention of her soon-to-be ex. That's why I asked him to take me away. Hitomi flatly stated as Hana wondered why, but she decided not to ask about it as she goes over to the Uchiha matriarch. After getting checked out, Makoto slowly awoke during that time and saw where she was. Where am I? She weakly as her vision began to clear as she saw Hitomi, Nurse Retsu, and a feral-looking Minato double before turning her attention towards a window as she figured out exactly where she was. I see, we're somewhere deep in the forest of death, she said, grunting as she slowly sat herself up. Hitomi looked at her friend as she asked the big question that had been on her mind. Makoto, tell us, what happened to you? Why were you in the forest by yourself? She asked as everyone in the room was quite interested. Taking a deep breath, the Ravenette began telling her tale. I've arrived home that night after getting something to spice up the night with my husband, since I had bought some new lingerie, and after I went to take a shower to freshen up before Fugaku came to bed. After getting ready and putting on my new underwear, as it was quite the red number of a bra and panties that barely covered my nipples, and as I also put on a pair of black high heels and waited in the master bedroom as of wait there for over 2 hours since he still hadn't come home yet. So, with me frustrated from waiting, I put on my robe and went looking for him since I was sick and tired of him ignoring my needs. Figuring he was still in a clan meeting, I headed toward the meeting room downstairs in our house. Only once I've arrived there, I heard their hushed voices as they were whispering intently, as it had gotten my curious, so I cracked the door to hear just what they were saying. Everything is almost in place, just as planned. I heard one of our Jonin clansmen say as I've noticed that all of our clansmen from Genin to Chunin to Jonin and even the police force were in the room. Good, within a couple of days, we will take over Konoha with no one to stop us. I heard another person say as I was shocked to see that it was my husband, as I soon realized what the meeting was about, as it was the coup d'état plan that he'd been talking about for months. However, before I could even sneak away, I was struck from behind as my entire world went dark. And then I woke up here. Makoto finished as the 2 women gasped. I don't believe it, the Uchiha are planning a coup d'état. But why did this? Hana asked, wanting to know what could bring an entire clan to turn against their own village, as Hitomi wondered the same thing. Because almost everyone in my clan feels that everyone in Konoha doesn't trust us, or at least that's what I felt. Makoto solemnly stated as she had heard whispers from the other villagers as she noticed the hooded Naruto standing against the wall. Are you the one who saved me? She asked as he nodded. Then can I see the face of my savior? She asked, wanting to at least see the face of the man who saved her. The demonic Uzumaki crossed his arms as he thought about it. Okay, only if you and Nurse Retsu can keep a secret, as this doesn't leave the forest or this room, he said in a serious tone, since he wants his identity to remain mysterious. Both black-haired women looked at each other as they soon agreed. To our graves, they both said together as Naruto reached up and removed his hood, as both of them are shocked to see who he was. Naruto, is that you? Hana gasped again as she couldn't believe that the boy that she used to look after in the hospital whenever he got hurt was in fact still alive. Makoto was left speechless as she saw the son of her best friend standing right before her very eyes. What happened to Naruto and why were we lied to? She thought as checked him over, noticing the nurse doing the same. And he's grown into such a handsome man, she mentally added, while her fellow brunette having similar thought as both their faces gain healthy blushes. Naruto then raised a hand, getting both of their attention. I know you have a lot of questions about me, but for now, Makoto. He started turning his attention towards the Uchiha matriarch. Tell me who's all involved with the coup d'état? He asked as he already had a plan forming for how to stop this. Even though he held no love for the village, there were still people who he wanted to protect. How can you stop them? You're just one against who knows how many Uchiha. Hana questioned with concern, since he'd be greatly outnumbered before Hitomi interjected. I think you should have a bit more faith in Naruto, for he's not what he seems to be. The Hyuga MILF stated as she remembers the clause that her young lover had used to save her from her would-be rapists. Well, if you say so, Hitomi. Makoto said, slightly unsure as she told Naruto what she knew as well, where he needs to go, including the meeting place that every Uchiha used. Late at night, Naruto arrived at the Uchiha district as he silently slipped into the meeting room where he could see a good clip of the Uchiha clan were already here, having just arrived, as he heard the details of this coup while their leader, Fugaku, came up in front as he figured it was time for a speech. Everyone. The time is almost upon us for when we take Konoha for the good of our clan. The clan head announced as he had more planned, but the hooded blonde had heard enough. Revealing himself from the shadows, the members of the coup were surprised as Naruto stood behind Fugaku. Yeah, about that, your plan to backstab the village isn't going to happen. He stated as he quickly moved to the center of the room with every present Uchiha armed to the teeth. Because not a single one of you are even going to survive tonight. He declared as one of the Uchiha behind him slowly moved into position to kill him as he began preparing his sword to strike him down with his Sharingan activated. The would-be assassin was shocked when a single finger removed his eye, shocking everyone as he fell while Naruto lowered his arm where they all could see that his hands transformed into claws while his skin turned black with red veins. Who's next? The Uzumaki taunted as all of them except Fugaku attacked him as he just smirked as he blocked and countered their attacks as he swiped and slashed, taking about 5 of them as the clan of Sharingan wielders pressed on with their assault. After a few moments of butchering, the room that was once clean had quickly becomes covered more blood and severed bodies that covered up most of the claw marks on both the floor and the walls. Naruto, grinning at the body count he'd racked up, changed his hands back to normal as he began making hand signs that weren't familiar to those remaining. Fire style, forbidden black dragon flames. He called as he breathed in quickly before releasing a torrent of black flames as everyone hit by it was burned into a crisp, leaving nothing but ash and a deep scorch mark as the fire burned everyone and everything around them as their agonizing screaming quickly died as soon as they're released until only Fugaku remained. Now it's just you and me, he said with a feral snarl as his hands turned back into claws ready to slice more body parts. The Uchiha head backed away in fear before realizing something. That jutsu you used, it was one of the forbidden jutsus from the missing scroll of forbidden seals, isn't it? He demanded, only to get no answer from the approaching demon. You have it, don't you? He accused, glaring at the monster that destroyed his army using power that rightfully belongs to his clan. Seeing the power-hungry look in the soon-to-be-dead man's eyes, Naruto decided to have a little fun with him. Yes, I once had it, but I destroyed it after learning all its secrets. He lied, causing Fugaku to become enraged about that. You bastard! How could you do such a thing? That power should have been mine. The man yelled while thinking of a way to catch the hooded man and grill everything he knew about the scroll out of him as he brought out a kunai as well, activating his clan's bloodline. No matter, since once I kill you, I will get all I need from your body. He declared as he charged at the killer of his men with the intent of killing him as Naruto waits for him to get closer until Shink. He counter-kicked Fugaku off guard and jabbed his clawed hand into his side, getting the Uchiha head to look down only to see the bladed appendage before kicking him away as the clan's patriarch grabbed his side hoping to stop the bleeding. What the hell, are you? He demanded as he was bleeding very heavily from the attack he'd never seen before. Naruto came up to him and put his clawed hand at his neck and says, simple really. He said, lifting Fugaku up so that they were eye to eye. I'm a demon born out of hatred for this very village, he stated as his voice took a demonic tone while his slit eyes glowed aggressively. If you kill me now, you will be the enemy of the mighty Uchiha and we will never rest until you are dead. Fugaku declared as blood and spit left his lips as he was losing blood faster from his sudden lift up. Listening to his opponent's last words, Naruto gave him a mocking chuckle. Yeah, not when your wife, or should I say ex-wife, is in charge. He stated as he brought his other hand up and decapitated the wounded man before he could even question about what he meant. The next morning in her office, Tsunade sat filling out the reports over what happened last night as well other things. So Fugaku, along with a few other Uchiha members, were planning a rebellion. All because they weren't satisfied of what you had given them, right mom? Sayuri asked as she helped out her mother with the paperwork. Tsunade nodded as she answered her daughter's questions. Yes, but good thing there was list of names or else I might have put some innocent people in prison, she said with a small smile since the list of names meant less paperwork for her to fill out. What about the guy's wife, Makoto? What about her? The Senju heiress asked, wondering why the wife of the clan head wasn't being arrested. Well, she said she had no idea about the rebellion as well as finding out that her husband was killed, by what exactly since we still don't know. The busty blonde said since whatever attacked the Uchiha last night had left behind serious carnage that she hadn't seen since the Third Shinobi War. Mom, I think this is getting serious. The younger Senju said with a serious look on her face, getting her mother to look up from the paperwork. Whatever this thing is, I don't know if it's good thing or bad, she added since she had mixed emotions about the killings that been happening these last few days since this creature been killing people in the forest, but now here it is making its mark in their very own village. Tsunade sighed since her daughter raised a very strong point. I know, but for now let leave the few survivors mourn their dead kin. She instructed, seeing as the few remaining Uchihas have just lost a majority of their family, as she switched though other reports. Mom, I think whatever did this may also be the same creature that lives in the forest of death since the claw marks on the trees matched the others found throughout the village. I think that who or whatever did this might be trying to get rid of the corruption of this village. Sayuri explained to her mother, who nodded in thought since so far the three Chunins were possibly going to harm someone while the Uchihas were about to start a civil war. Meanwhile, back in the master bedroom of the Uchiha compound, Makoto was on her knees still wearing the same lingerie that she was planning to show her now deceased husband, but now she had a new man in her life as she was currently kneeling down in front of Naruto, as she was doing. He's so young, yet he has a massive, Makoto thought as she licked and kissed his huge manhood, as it's too much for her mouth to take as she covered the rest with her huge double G coupe as she began giving him a tit job. Naruto was enjoying this greatly as he felt the Uchiha MILF's warm mouth and soft firm as she began bobbing her head faster as she was realizing how much she loved his thickness, as well marveled at his stamina since she'd been at it for a good 20 minutes. Get ready, Miko-chan, I'm about to blow, he growled as he was reaching his limit as he grabbed the back of her head, forcing the rest of his into her mouth, causing the ravinette to widen her eyes as she actually came as he fired his first load down her throat as she quickly had another orgasm as she found out exactly how much he released as she drinks everything she could while her stomach slightly bulged at the amount she swallowed. After his release finished, the demonic Uzumaki pulled his from her mouth, spattering her face with leftover sperm. So much, Makoto moaned, rubbing her belly full of cum while panting for much needed air as she realized that she was sweating a bit from the exertion before feeling the younger man picking her up as he placed her on the bed as she looked at him, wondering what he had in store for her next. Naruto glanced down at the widowed MILF as he rested his against her, drenched. Are you ready? He growled as the blushing woman nodded as he removed her bra and panties that were completely drenched from her arousal and lifts up her legs to hold them in place as he thrusts Hisanto, causing her to bounce. Kami, it's so huge, Makoto screamed loudly, having never felt something so enormous inside of her as her inner walls tightly clamped around his staff. Naruto, feeling her tightness, marveled for a moment as his slightly groaned from how tight she was squeezing. How could a mother of two be so tight? Naruto asked her with a husky tone as he began moving as the Uchiha MILF began screaming louder with her violently bouncing upon each thrust as the whole room was soon filled with Makoto's shouts of pent-up lust as he moved his arms upward to hold her legs as he forces more of his deeper inside her. Makoto's screams grow louder at the feeling of this man hitting her deepest spots. She cried out, loving the whiskered blondes as he's way superior in size compared to Fugaku, since she can feel how well it hits all the right places as well, ones she'd never knew she had. Naruto grinned as he leaned forward to put one of the ravinettes into his mouth and starts on it as he started increasing his thrusting, causing the woman to scream louder while juices flow out of her as it's being rammed by his before he switched as he moved his hand to begin rubbing the one that he left as he drives Hisanto even more as the tip was beginning to hit her womb. I'm about to come, he growled, feeling his balls tightening while also feeling his soon-to-be second mate tighten around him even more at the sound. Me too, I inside. Together, Makoto gasped out as she's having a difficult time processing her thoughts as she felt herself about to have her first real orgasm in years. Hearing her say that caused the Uzumaki to increase his pace while forcing himself deep into the back of her baby oven until he felt Makoto spasm around him. Coming, she screamed, arching her back while pressing her body against her new lover as she heard Naruto grunt while also pressing against her as his second load of boiling seed entered, flooding her womb as the amount was causing her belly to once again expand. How much cum could he possibly have? She mentally exclaimed as she felt him continue to release bursts upon bursts of hot baby batter as she felt like she was about to start passing out. After 4 hours of rough lovemaking, Makoto was face down on all fours with a stomach full of Naruto's cum since he released so much it made her look like several months pregnant as she glanced nervously over her shoulder at the demonic blonde to see that he was rubbing his still hard against hair as she has a deep blush on her face. "N Naruto, please leave my B bottom alone B because of N never took anything in T there," she begged, asking her new lover to leave that place alone as she had never had anal before. Naruto didn't answer her since he had made his mind up as he made a cross-like hand sign as 2 exact copies of him appeared in a puff of smoke as one appeared under Makoto while the other in front of her as she looked at the clone's heart as he rubbed it closer to her face before she felt 2 entering her 2 holes. The original entering her while the first clone re-entered her stuffed folds, as the second clone had pushed the tip of his into her mouth as she opened wider, allowing him to push more into her throat as she started moaning as she felt the 2 behind and under her start to thrust there into her, causing her to scream around the third. "This is too much, yet I feel so excited to be like this with Naruto's massive," she mentally screamed in pleasure, feeling in mouth were being treated roughly by Naruto and his 2 clones as she smiled, having decided it was a good thing to activate the room's silencing seals as she enjoyed her first gangbang. As all 3 Narutos used Makoto more and more, the real one began thrusting his deeper into the Uchiha matriarch's incredibly tight while the first clone thrusts his deeper into her, allowing her juices to coat it, allowing him to thrust faster while playing with her lactating tits as the second is ramming his deep into her throat, gripping her silky locks as all 4 kept going for a while until all 3 blondes cummed inside of her at the same time. "Oh Cammy, they're filling me with so much baby cream," the raven-haired MILF mentally cried, accepting their semen forced as her already swollen stomach expanded to an even greater size before the younger man and his 2 copies removed themselves before they were done as they blasted the rest of their release all over her body, covering their mate in their sticky white fluid. Seeing the still raging monsters before her, Makoto knew that all 3 of them still had more to release and she was looking forward to it. After an additional 8 hours of gangbanging, Naruto laid down with Makoto, who was laying on top of him as she completely spent, yet so much happier because her late husband never once satisfied her since they'd been married, but now all that changed with the younger stud as he marked her as his mate, as she has the mark on her shoulder after he bit it, meant that she would always be satisfied as she now felt more energized from receiving her mark. "Miko-chan, I need to get some clothing for Hito-chan, so may I please use your shower?" he asked as she nodded as she lightly rubs her stomach filled up with his cum as the Uzumaki got up to go wash himself. Seeing him head towards the bathroom, Makoto couldn't help but feel happy that she finally found a lover that can satisfy her as she looks down at her stomach as it was still bloated from her time with said lover as she looks to be pregnant with triplets as she rubbed her belly tenderly. "Your father is a great man and I know you'll be as great as him as well," she mentally cooed, hoping that she had become impregnated again as she imagines the future with him and his other mates as well, bearing his children who will bring greatness back to her clan. After leaving the Uchiha compound, Naruto was leaping around the village since he's on a run for clothing for Hitomi as well possible others who might be staying at his place whether permanently or just for a night. However, he heard something coming from a nearby training ground as he decided to see what the commotion was all about. Arriving at the training ground, the demonic Uzumaki was enraged to see a puppy shaking in fear as it was hiding from a Jonin who was angry as he was wearing a blue bandana over his dark brown hair as well small circular sunglasses. "Damn that dog-loving bitch," he cursed as he continued looking for that puppy as he going to use as a target dummy, but the stupid mutt kept hiding from him. "Once I get through with that worthless mutt, I'm going after that Inuzuka bitch for dumping me and slapping my handsome face," he growled, clenching his hands into fists since that bitch from a clan of flea bags dumped and slapped him for not liking dogs, which was completely stupid since he was the best thing to ever happen to that ungrateful bitch. Naruto, who caught a good look at the man's face, couldn't help but remember where he had seen him before in his old life when he was still human as his head started hurting as he began recalling the memory. "Hold still, you damn brat. I have to improve my throwing skills." I heard the man, who was a chunin back then, yelled at me as he has several sets of kunais and was looking down range at me as my clothes, consisting of a black shirt with an orange spiral and white shorts, were torn and blooded since he has me tied to a wooden pole which was covered by the other kunais he had thrown, as some were sticking out of said post while some were embedded in my body. Damn it, just untie me already, you asshole. I screamed as I kept squirming trying to free myself. AARG. Only for me to cry out as the guy threw another kunai that nailed into my shoulder. Shut it, you damn demon brat. The Chunin yelled as he threw another projectile at me, as this went on for hours until I pasted out from blood lost. The sight of this particular Konoha nin caused the demonic chakra within Naruto to vapor in the air as he vanished, as the Junin suddenly jerked, feeling something impaling him from behind as he starts looking down in confusion as he noticed a new hole in his chest and his heart was outside as laying on the ground. You like picking on the weak? Well, that only proved that you're weaker instead of strong, as you've brought this on yourself. The Uzumaki cruelly stated as he appeared in front of the dying man. Now go to hell, remembering that Naruto Uzumaki was your slayer. He growled in a demonic whisper before crushing the heart of the Jonin under his foot before falling onto the ground dead. After seeing the glasses-wearing man falls, the transformed blonde then noticed the puppy that is it soon came out of hiding as the poor thing was shaking, as he then remembered a place that belongs to a clan that looked after dogs, so he picked the puppy up and heads over there. After Naruto dropped off the puppy, he continued his way towards the shopping district, leaping from the rooftop of one building to the next as he took a quick look around, and then he notices one of the store's windows was shattered and the lights were on. Wondering what it could be, he headed towards said shop to see what's going on, only to immediately take cover with the corner of the wall next after landing through the broken window as he leans his head in order to see of what's happening. No, you can't. A woman yelled as she was being held against her will by a man along with 3 others as they were looting the store for all they had. The first one yelled as he slaps her face as she watched helplessly as these thieves ruined her livelihood, and there nothing that she could do about it since they had bound her hands before her back as well her ankles so she couldn't move. The group continued to raid the store for all it had. Until one of the thieves released a small scream, but it was quickly followed by silence as the remaining 3 stopped their looting to investigate as one of them moved to look before he also screamed but soon quickly became silent again. Hearing this but not seeing any bodies, the last 2 decided to just run for it while letting go the woman, hoping that whatever it was would kill her first before she saw a shadow following the 2 thieves as they ran into the streets as the shadow followed them. Until finally 2 screams resounded, followed quickly by silence one more. The woman didn't know what she should do as she heard footsteps and the sound of something dripping down as she saw a foot stepping into her store, followed by another, and then finally a hooded person with blood on his hands as she started thinking that this might be the end for her as he kneeled down before her. Are you alright, miss? He asked as the woman freaked out, moving away from him. No. Please don't kill me. She screamed with fear in her teary eyes as she propped herself against the wall as the Uzumaki saw she had long black hair reaching her upper back, tied in a ponytail with a purple scrunchie as well, short bangs covering her hazel brown eyes as she's wearing a white shirt with long purple sleeves, black pants and matching colored boots. She also has a slender curvaceous figure as evidenced by how her shirt snugged against her large G-cup while her pants hugged tightly against her wide hips and perky peach, and from the way she was yelling at the robbers, it was clear she was obviously the owner of this store that sells just what he'd been looking for as he sighed before moving to pick her up and place her on the table as he cut her binding as he began cleaning and moving the first 2 dead bodies out of the store. Just who are you? The owner asked, sitting herself up as she rubbed her wrists while looking at the mysterious man who killed those thieves. Why do you want to know? Naruto asked as he throws the dead bodies toward the street where they landed next to their friends. Well, even though you killed them, but you saved me. I'm Ikumi Unagiya, by the way, in my store, so I'd like to know who you are. The now identified Ikumi asked while introducing herself as the hooded demon, sighs heavily. Fine, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. He simply said as he removed his hood to show his face to her as the store owner was in shock since the young boy who used to hide from mobs was still alive and standing right here in front of her. Naruto. Is that really you? Ikumi exclaimed in complete disbelief since the entire village been told that he was dead, as nearly everyone celebrated hearing that the QB brat was now dead and that their loved ones have finally been avenged as she quickly stood up off the table taking a closer look at him, blushing a bit as she saw what a stud he turned out to be. Naruto was a bit confused since her tone made it sound like she was familiar with him. You say that like you known me personally? He questioned as he crossed his arms while raising an eyebrow. Don't you remember me? You used to call me Ikumi Nichan since I used to hide you away from the mobs and you even went to the academy with my son Kaoru. She said as tears slowly appeared in her eyes since her son died 2 years ago during a mission outside Konoha as the whisker blonde tried to remember as he was only able to recover a flash of memory but it was enough for him to go on. Yeah, I remember now. He said as the Ravenet mother walked up to him and wrapped her arms around him as she hugged him tightly. I'm so glad that you are alive, she exclaimed pressing herself against him as tears continued to flow from her eyes. But why did you hide? Why didn't you come back to the village after what happened? She asked wondering why the boy, now young man, she cared for like a younger brother never returned after that day. That's something I will tell you another day, but for now I have to leave. Naruto stated since he wanted to get the clothes he came for and head back home to his mate as Ikumi noticed the sun beginning to crest over the horizon as she stopped him from leaving since she knew she needed to hide him, and fast. What are you doing Ikumi? The Uzumaki asked as he was dragged upstairs by the curvy store owner. The Jonin and Anbu will be here in a matter of minutes when everyone sees the bodies, so you need to hide. Ikumi stated as she pulled him towards a door. My bedroom should suffice until the coast is clear. She added pushing him into her bedroom and locked the door before he could even speak a word. True to her words, Ikumi saw a massive group of curious people have gathered at the damaged storefront as part of the group included the team that might have been Naruto's team, named Team 7, were present. Hey, what's going on here? Did something happen while we were away for our mission? Sakura questioned seeing the group of people gathered around the broken window. Yeah, just what happened while we were gone. Kakashi thought seeing that something is wrong as he moved to investigate while putting his book away. Sasuke just huffed not caring about what might have happened. Whatever, it has nothing to do with the U. Before he could finish his sentence, he and his teammates overheard a few villagers talking. Did you hear? Over 25% of the Uchiha clan were planning a rebellion and were killed for it. One of them said causing another villager to not having heard the same thing. Yeah, I heard them say it was the demon from the Forest of Death since they've found claw marks on the wall of the meeting room. They added causing those listening to gasp or widen their eyes in either shock and or fear. But I heard they only found one body in that meeting room, and it was the Uchiha clan leader Fugaku with his body jacked up and his head decapitated. Another one added since the former clan head was the only intact body the Anbu had found. As they kept talking, Sasuke ran toward home leaving his teammates behind as Sakura went up to them and asked if they were just rumors but the villagers told her that they were not. Arriving at the Uchiha compound, Sasuke ran inside of his house and saw his mother and his older sister, who has long raven black tied in a ponytail and black eyes wearing Anbu gear as she just returned from her mission while also having just heard the news from Mikoto about what happened. Mother, tell me it's not true. Sasuke demanded wanting to deny the rumors since the Uchiha were elites and nothing could kill an elite nothing. Mikoto turned her attention towards her youngest as she saw how very close he was to be having a breakdown. I'm sorry Sasuke, but it's true. Your father as well many of our clan are dead. She stated with tears in her eyes as she now tells her youngest that Fugaku is dead along with others. After hearing that Sasuke couldn't take it as he started shaking violently while his eyes started twitching uncontrollably, he screamed angrily before rushing out of the house not able to hear his mother or sister's words. Naruto had been in Ikumi's bedroom all morning waiting for the crowd outside to left while the mentioned store owner was still being questioned by the Anbu at this moment but knew that he couldn't stay here for long since he needed to go but then he heard the door opening as he saw the Ravenet walking in. I started to believe it wasn't going to end, she said with a deep sigh as she looked at the demonic blonde. I agree, what did they ask you? Naruto asked as Ikumi tells him a few things like what happened in her store home and how she lied about how it all is happening so fast that she couldn't even see anything. Then she takes a good look at him and still couldn't believe that he used to be that little kid she helped hid from the mobs as she once again started to blush having seen him grown into a very handsome young man. Anyway, is there anything you need? she asked with a slight stutter as she started to feel some suppressed feelings starting to resurface. Naruto then nods as he answered. Yes, I do, with clothes and food for starters, enough for several women. He asked since he'll be needing as much as he could get as the ravenet nodded. I can do that since I do own a general store after all, she said with a wink before continuing. And with my friend's help, you don't have to worry about food. She added since her friend owns a food stand in the village. Naruto looked at her confused. Your friend, what's her name again? He asked as the curvy MILF smiled, thinking of her same name friend who cared about Naruto as well. Her name is Ikumi, also, Ikumi Mito, in fact, as we've worked together to hide you when you were little. She said with a smile. I think I remember her, Naruto trailed in though as he fattily recalled another busty woman who was also with Ikumi. Anyway, can I use your bathroom? I smell like blood and don't want to draw any more attention than I've already have. He asked, wanting to get cleaned up before heading back home in the forest. Ikumi thought of this as a chance since she has been very lonely since her son died. Only if I can join you, she said with a voice as there was also a certain gleam in her eyes causing the Uzumaki to raise an eyebrow. I need one too after all the excitement that happened, she added since she was also dirty from when her would-be robbers broke in. Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he accepted her proposal. Suit yourself, he simply said as she led him towards the bathroom as a grin appeared on her face. Naruto was already prepared inside of the bathroom since he had stripped himself of his clothing while Ikumi was standing outside as she had just taken off her shirt to show her leopard print bra, which seems ready to snap from holding her gigantic milk jugs, followed by her tight pants to show her matching panties as she started removing her bra first. I wonder if the rest of him has grown as well, she thought with a blush rising on her cheeks while thinking what she should do once she goes in there with the boy now man as she took a deep breath. Okay, it's now or never, she mentally prepared herself as she removes the rest of her underwear as she goes inside only to stop in front of the shower as her face burned blighter upon the sight of Naruto who's washing his hair as she checks out his muscles and how well built he is as she goes up to him. See, can I wash your back? She asked with a stutter while feeling her body heating up as she rubbed her thighs a little. Naruto simply nodded as the raven-haired MILF started washing his back as she couldn't help but to feel his body as she puts a bit of soap onto her and placed them against his back. Unagia-san, he asked surprised as he looks at her to see a familiar gleam in her eyes. How about I do your back, the curvy store owner purred as she started scrubbing the blonde demon's back with her motherly mounds as milk slowly started leaking from her hardened nipples. Naruto, knowing where this was going, turned towards her while raising an eyebrow at her. You're sure that you want to do this? He asked as she nodded before pulling herself closer to kiss him, causing his little demon to wake up again. The young demon soon kissed her back as he grabbed one of her, giving it a good firm squeeze, while moving his other hand down toward her as he started fingering it. WWW. Ikumi pulled herself away from their kissing and as she began moaning, which quickly became louder as he puts the breast he was fondling into his mouth and starts on it as he began drinking her milk. WWW. The pleasure her body was feeling soon became too much as she finally had her first orgasm in years. Bring his juices coated fingers to his mouth, Naruto began tasting as he hummed at her flavor. You taste pretty good, Ikumi Nichan, he huskily said as he lays on his back with the MILF turned on top of him as they got in a 69 position as she is looking at his as she couldn't help but drool at the sight of it since it was the biggest and longest she'd ever seen. After taking a few moments, Ikumi had finally gone from licking Naruto's toe taking it into her mouth, except she couldn't take all of it, so she wrapped the rest of the massive rod with her as she rubbed on it, giving him a tit and blow job combo, while said blonde was licking and fingering her as she'd already experienced 2 more orgasms from how much of her juices flowing out of it. They kept it up for a while long until both of them come with the demonic Uzumaki releasing a huge load into her mouth as the ravenet's juices gushed out of her, covering up his face as his release becomes too much for her to drink, so she removed her mouth to breathe as he continues to fire the remainder of his load into the air as she quickly became coated from her face and head down to her chest and cleavage. Oh Kami, he comes so much and it feels so warm on my skin, the curvy MILF mentally moaned as she moved to her feet, rubbing her little brother figure's release all over her chest and stomach, and pressed her hands against the wall as Naruto stood behind her with his hard rubbing against her entrance. I can't believe that I am about to have him. She thought as she felt him push the tip of his into her before pushing more inside of her, causing her to hiss from not having anything inside of her, let alone anything this big, since her son's death. Before the blonde stopped moving as he noticed that she was in pain. It's alright, Jay, just keep going. She winced, squeezing her inner walls around him since she wanted this for so long. Naruto nodded in understanding as he started thrusting his into her as Ikumi started screaming as her lactating tits bounced up with each thrust he made. "Nei-chan, you're squeezing me pretty tightly," he grunted, feeling the walls of her getting tighter around him as her juices allowed him to push even more of his length inside as he thrust even faster than before, with the MILF screaming louder as she felt his going in deeper by the second. "Oa, Naruto, you're fat thick, it's so deep inside of me," Ikumi screamed since she couldn't believe just how big and thick he is as she gasped, feeling his hands grabbing her legs as he then lifted her up into a full Nelson position as she felt his went even deeper. She screamed louder than before as she feels the tip of Naruto's hit against her womb like it's trying to enter it. Naruto then turned her around before pressing her back against the wall as he rammed himself harder than before as the woman continued to scream louder before he muffled her by kissing her deeply as he thrust his into her like a beast. "You have ruined me for other men. I want only you and you alone," Ikumi lustfully screamed as she was drenched with sweat, milk, and semen as the two had been going at it for hours, as evidenced by her belly which was so full of cum that she looked 9 months pregnant, as they're now back in her bedroom on her bed as she sat atop Naruto as he held her hips while thrusting his into her like crazy as both of them were reaching their limit once more. "Please give me your children, Naruto. I want to become a mother again," she screamed in a begging tone as she wants to become pregnant again. Naruto gave her a feral grin. "Sure, Nei-chan, I'll give you children who'll be better than that brat Kaoru Tem," he growled as he recalled her son being very rude to him back in the academy. At the moment, both of them shared another orgasm once again as the demonic Uzumaki fired another load into the Unagia woman's womb. Yes, Naruto, give me better children than that brat since he was rude even to his own mother," she cried out, arching her back as milk squirted from her tits just as he bit her hard on the neck, marking her as his triggering another orgasm right before she faints, feeling him empty inside her once more as she collapsed onto him with a belly full of hot potent seed. After that, Naruto slowly removed himself from her overflowing folds as he tucked her into bed so she can rest up. "Sleep well, Nei-chan, since we'll be doing this again along with my other mates," he said as he considered what he should do with all these women, but for now he should head on home. That's the end of part 1. The foundation has been laid, and Naruto's new path is only just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fanfiction. Comment, part 2 inches if you want to see how Naruto's alliances turn into something even bigger.